Okay, so, well, first of all, thank you so much for finding the time and becoming part of this small business HR compliance webinar we have put together for all of you small business owners. The purpose of this is for, to give you some insights on things to watch out as a business owner, any kind of situations that we have been, we have seen with clients, and we have been as well as part of it that you should probably learn what to do in those kind of situations, and in overall holistically just kind of how to manage the current way of doing business with so many trends that are happening, like quiet quitting and everybody leaving their jobs. So we kind of want to be able to help you manage those situations and the current trends as well. So just a little bit to give you a background on who we are. Basically, Startup Tandem provides a lot of services, and we provide a lot of services in finance, as a fractional CFO, in accounting and bookkeeping and tax advisory and HR. And today we're going to be focusing on the HR side of those businesses. And our goal is to help entrepreneurs build a well-established and stable infrastructure from a very, very early stage. It has been proven that if you start from a very early stage, you actually end up saving a lot of money. And as we're going to see later through the presentation, we also are, save the risk of getting into a lawsuit. So here we are. My name is Alejandra Santos. I am the CEO and founder of Startup Tandem. And in today's presentation, you will also get to hear Carlyn Wice, which is our Chief of People, Culture, and HR. She handles everything that's culture, people management, and obviously HR consulting. And before we start, I'm going to go ahead and start a poll just to see, who our, candidates in this presentation are. And please feel free to just, there's no right or wrong answer. So here it goes. So the first question is, how many of you hire employees from other states? The second question is, how many of you have an employee handbook? And then the third question is, how many of you know about call savers? And the fourth is, how many employees left your company this year? Either involuntarily or voluntarily. So please, there's 5 questions. Waiting for everybody to participate. Okay. So, there's 2 people coming in. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and end the poll now. All right, so for the first question, how many of you hire employees from other states? Everybody, 68% said I have employees everywhere, and 33% I only hire in my state. So one of the big areas that we are going to focus on is how to manage state compliance with different states. And the good thing is that if you're in California, you will be able to manage a lot of those compliance everywhere else. How many of you have an employee handbook? Well, 33% says it's our playbook, 67% says we have no time to create one, and another thing that we will touch on would be employee handbook. How many of you know about call savers? 33% is very knowledgeable, 67% is I want to know more, and we will touch on that as well. And how many employees left your company this year? It looks like 67% said 1 of 5 and 33% 5 or more. I'm surprised that's actually not a bigger number. And why do you think employees quit? 33% says money and 67% work-life balance. And those are all really good answers. So I'm going to share the results. So with everybody that, is here, let's go ahead and start the presentation. Carlyn, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. I'm really excited to share some common HR challenges with you today. And we'll also go over some vital services that address these challenges, which we happen to also offer at Startup Tandem. We'll show you where to find regulations and finally some tips and tricks to get and stay compliant. And after this webinar, we will be sharing materials via email, some assets we put together. So you don't need to worry about taking notes. And let's just get started. So we've seen some common HR challenges this year, and a lot of it is really piggybacking on the pandemic. There are a lot of other factors, though, that play into it. The first one being engaging the workforce. So productivity is especially weird in this post-pandemic, post-resignation world. We're seeing kind of the tail end or the next phase of the post-Great Resignation or the Great Resignation, which is that whole quiet quitting trend. There's a lot of different things going on, but it's possibly harder than ever to motivate employees, especially if you have a component of hybrid or remote workers. Next, attracting talent. With talent nowadays, it's really tricky. Compensation is not necessarily king anymore. We're seeing a lot of statistics that show things like purpose and meaning in employees' work is really important. So cool statistic we found was that 9 out of 10 professionals that said that they would sacrifice 23% of their future earnings, which in this pool of people was $21,000 on average a year, for purpose or meaning in their work. So, compensation, benefits, those things that we once thought were really important, really no longer are. Things are changing a lot. Next, managing relationships. Conflict management and networking fall under this. We cannot stress enough conflict management. We're really, we've learned the hard way. We've seen it a lot. You need to really be hiring for this soft skill or power skill. The conflict management is not necessarily something that's easy to teach. And so we really emphasize that this is something that you hire for. And it's really devastating if you don't have folks on your team who have good conflict management skills, because that can lead to low morale, quitting, insubordination, a lot of gnarly things that we've seen. Next, training and development strategies. Professional development absolutely leads to expertise. It is a wonderful thing. It leads to retention. They can grow as your company grows. It's really wonderful overall. We have seen that it's a challenge, though, because it's super expensive. And if you're not making sure that they're being grown in a way that helps grow along with the company, that's not aligned with the company, it's just not going to make much sense. Moving on to the next 4 common challenges with talent retention. This includes team building, work satisfaction, and motivation. And these are all things we're going to touch on more a little bit later, but it's really unique in today's world because not only because a lot of folks are remote, but because it's a pretty competitive market to hire folks. And it's always really nuanced trying to figure out what potential candidates want and need as time goes on. We're seeing a lot of stuff out in the literature about work satisfaction, being that people really want to feel appreciated. There's a lot about, it's almost like a love language at work or appreciation style at work. And then, of course, motivating people is such an art. And next, we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion. all buzzwords, very popular and for a really great reason. We all know why this stuff's important, not just for innovation, but just different perspectives. There's so much we can gain from being diverse. But a lot of folks, employers don't always know why we need to cover ourselves in this arena. And it really comes down to legal stuff like avoiding discrimination claims. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Next, change management. Over, the COVID pandemic, we were really trained to see that change can come at us no matter what, unexpectedly, and everyone really needs to scramble to kind of get things together and be resilient and kind of work through that. So it's really neat and uniting that we've all been able to do that and move on. But what we're seeing is there's a lot to learn, little nuggets we can pull out to share about what that means for the future of change and change implementation coming from managers. And then finally, health and well-being. This is another trend that hopefully stays a thing and not just it's a fad, which is that workplace safety has moved beyond the physical. Yes, we're worried about workman's comp claims and all that stuff. But too, as employers, there's a huge responsibility now to become kind of responsible for emotional safety too. And this is something that plays into a lot of mandates like sexual harassment and things like that, but also does play into retention of employees because people who feel safe are going to stay. So now moving on to vital HR services. I'll just read these. This is an overview of what we believe is most important today, and then we'll break it down later. So recruiting process, state and federal regs and laws, retention process, termination and layoff process, contracts consulting, onboarding, training and development, leadership coaching, and compensation and benefits. So our recruiting process is definitely not unique in that it is evidence-based. It's stuff that works. It's a complete science. We're not reinventing the wheel here or gambling with anyone's time. But I'll share a little bit about what we do specifically. So if you don't have job descriptions written already, we write them or we edit yours for clarity and to make sure we optimize attracting the talent that's really, the talent that you want and need and want to retain. Our candidates come from our personal, professional connections, sometimes your referrals in-house, and in-person things like job fairs. Finally, online pools like Indeed and those various websites. We have a 3-interview process that includes case studies. So we have case studies that are technical and case studies that are behavioral. And then we too provide you with some matrices that kind of quantify the factors that are important to you and then also weigh them. So that's a process that we talk about together. Make sure, we know, hey, if Tableau is a skill that someone really needs, we're going to weigh that a lot. It could be 25% of their job, and make sure that you can be as objective as possible when you're looking at candidates. Then we implement some personality tests, conflict management tests, soft skills tests. And then this is something that's been really important, is not just a background check. You can go on things like goodhire.com and get a background check, and it might even verify schools and things like that. But what we're finding too is the schools is a really important part. So verifying schools that folks go to, unfortunately, not everyone's always 100% honest about stuff on their resume. So we really want to verify that they indeed got that education. We do a social media check, which is completely legal and very easy. If people put things out on the internet that are out there publicly, that it's kind of a fun piece actually to do. And then we do a thorough professional reference check, which is really verifying their work experience. We can't legally, ask much beyond the dates that somebody worked somewhere and what their role was, but we have gained so much information for our clients about their potential employees, regarding it's all kinds of things. Like, for example, we had someone who put something on their resume that was not really work, but it looked like it was somebody that sponsored their license, basically. And so we find out a lot about maybe people who are padding the truth a little bit or exaggerating themselves. So that says a lot about character. And again, we've learned the hard way and learned how to do this. And the last piece, the second piece here, is that we really look at your business as well. So we do intake interviews with you to make sure we understand your values and vision and mission and goals and all of those things. So we're playing a matchmaking service basically to make sure that we find candidates you want and that candidates that are going to stay. So moving on to state, federal regs and labor laws. This is something that is always changing. So we do help with payroll. We have different technologies we can suggest. And there are a lot of options out there, and we have pros and cons about different ones. And then when it comes to policies and systems, we will write your employee handbook. We will write PMPs for you. Policies and procedures are just as important to make sure that your employees know what to expect and know how to behave and act and be really aligned with your culture day to day. And then we also provide calendar updates on new regs, because like I said, they're always changing. There's new things all the time. For example, a couple years ago, California EDD implemented a new form for tax withholding. They incorporated a new law, the ABC test, kind of like we had seen in years past, but it's a lot newer regarding just, how they defined it. And it's really looking at employee versus independent contractor and 3 different questions you can ask to identify which you're hiring. A lot of folks get this wrong, to be frank. And there are a lot of repercussions that you want to avoid if you do that. And then, finally, EDD a couple years ago even changed their I-9 form because of COVID. So there's just things changing all the time. And a story we wanted to tell was that if you hire employees in multiple states, which we know now some of you have, it's just so tedious and complicated. It's amazing. So just looking at a state like Idaho, for example, and every state has their own things, but when you hire an employee, say you're based in California and you hire an employee in another state, you have to basically report to all kinds of different agencies within the state they reside, sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly, sometimes annually. And it's a lot. So for example, in Idaho, you will be reporting to the Idaho Department of Labor. You will be reporting to the Idaho State Tax Commissioner. And these are for things like unemployment insurance, withholding tax, all kinds of different employee taxes. Another fun story is that we've seen, just for forgetting to report a $0 tax owed for an unemployment insurance for one employee, we've seen a $500 fine. And this might not seem like a lot, but say you have 50 employees and you forget that deadline for all of them, and it doesn't really matter what state they're in, just say, $500 is that average fee or fine, you're looking at 25 grand right away. So it's really, really easy to rack up a lot of fees and fines if you're not tediously looking at all of these different states. And then moving on to employee handbooks, I'll just say real quick that your main components are going to be things like hours, compensation and benefits, and then, your culture, which is really more like rules alignment, your PMPs, policies and procedures, and then finally the legal stuff. After this webinar, you'll be emailed an asset, which is just something that includes a lot of the links you can go on for federal laws, state laws, and regulations, and even like manuals and pocket guides and different things to help you with being compliant with equal opportunity, non-discrimination laws, anti-harassment laws, workers' comp laws. Moving on to retention, we found that professional development is really key. It really can be expensive though. So that's something that we're very aware of when we're serving companies is we want to make sure that when you are growing or supporting an employee in their professional growth, that it does fit along with your company and that you're aligned. We've also seen a lot in the literature about appreciating employees. Employees talk a lot about, feeling appreciated. It's a lot like a love language, and identifying what that is for each one of your employees is super important because that's what's going to keep them there. If people leave or don't work out, have a plan B. So that's what that succession plan is talking about. We do have to be realistic that not everyone's going to stay forever, although that would be nice. If we do need to have a plan B. So sometimes it's actually a plan A. We know that somebody is going to, get older and or retire or whatever it may be. And we want to make sure that we have a real concrete plan for that. Performance reviews that motivate. We really advocate for a performance review that is not scary, it's not draconian, it's something that is quarterly and really looks at how aligned you are with the company rather than something that's like what you did wrong. Let's move forward with your action plan. Sometimes those, traditional performance reviews can be very scary or surprising. And what we really, again, advocate for is that you're having kind of bi-weekly conversations first off to talk about what's going on. And then quarterly, a little bit more of a formal performance review that's not just about feedback on performance, but it's about goals alignment and motivating employees going forward. Next, the termination and layoff process. This is something we're pretty proud to offer. We have called it a little bit informally the Up in the Air service. So if you've ever seen that movie or heard of it, it's basically firing people for you. But we also recognize that, layoffs happen as well. We were talking earlier today about Twitter losing, $4 million a day and how they've had to let go like 5,500 contract employees recently. You guys can correct me in the comments about the stats because it's always changing, but these big companies sometimes do need to lay off a lot of people. And the question is, how do you do that in a way that's really, respecting your employees and the time they put in, and then also covering yourself legally, right? So we provide different strategies, conversation counseling, guidance for you to support your transitional employees, ensure you have proper documentation, identify why you're terminating them or laying them off. really making sure the reason is super clear. And that is because a very, very common thing is wrongful termination claims. As you guys definitely know, employees, when they're let go, have a little bit of time on their hands and sometimes turn to a legal solution or a legal response, I'll say. And so it's just very important that you know your reason for laying someone off or letting them go. And we really help you identify that. And we help you document it so that, again, you're covering yourself legally. We make sure that you give them a chance if it is a performance issue, and that's all documented. And the last piece that we offer, I really like, it's actually the specific interest of mine, is just the exit interviews and analyzing multiple exit interviews so that you can get some feedback as a company. Like maybe there's a trend here, maybe there's something that we can change, and it's just all really valuable information. So that's what we offer in terms of termination and layoff services. Next is contracts consulting. So we make sure your contracts are valid, up to date, and classify employees correctly. I kind of touched on that already, and we'll touch on it again, but there's just so many lawsuits that you can see, not just with wrongful termination, but being classified wrongfully. And finally, other stuff like employee handbooks and policies and procedures. It's not contracts, but there's a lot of overlap. So where I'm going with that is that we want to make sure that your contracts are aligned with your employee handbook, and they're aligned with your policies and procedures, and they're really aligned with what you do day to day and what you say and communicate to your employees every day. And this is really a lot of legal stuff that at the end of the day, your lawyer will need to look over. But it's really so that you can kind of take that stress off of yourself and just, live for your business and your dream, and you can thrive without the threat of lawsuits, because it's unfortunately a part of our society today and the workplace today. Next, with onboarding, we provide checklists, mentorship programs, and other best practices tailored to your organization's culture. So, it's going to depend a lot if you're small or big, remote or in person, or hybrid. But we really look at, the history of your company, the strategy of your company, any things you have in like processes, policies, procedures, handbook, and make sure that is all presented right away to your onboarding employee, because just being as clear as possible at the beginning is very important for them to stay. I was going to find a really good statistic, but I have seen some wonderful ones where it shows that your onboarding process is the first impression, and it really is everything. So if you can bring someone on with a real jazzy presentation in person, or say you're remote, doesn't matter, but if you can really woo them and bring them in and make sure that all their questions are answered and they're very clear on where they're going, this is really going to help them feel like they belong, feel like they understand where they're going, and it will help you retain that employee. Next, we have a training and development. And this is not just about growing your employees. I hear that a lot. It's really about helping them to grow themselves. We really have to honor that each person on our team is a person, and that they have their professional journey. And, ideally and hopefully we can align that with your company. and it's a win-win situation. So we really have seen a lot of wonderful things come out of technologies like Coursera or UC online courses and programs. There are a lot of wonderful online certifications and degrees that employees can get. Their price point is not horrible, and that is really helpful. So this is just becoming more of a thing nowadays, is access to education and training. And I want to say too that growth varies from person to person. So this is a really kind of nuanced thing we do, where we look at each employee and what they need to fit into your big picture. Maybe historically it was just like there was a big company and they were bringing on a training on cybersecurity, and yes, those things are all very important, but we're also wanting to really bolster, the education and training of each employee, so that they, one, stay on the team, and two, feel like they're really growing themselves. Another thing that plays into this real quick is just regarding regulations is liability. So stuff like insurance and workers' comp. It's just important to keep in mind. This is, a compliance webinar. So this is stuff that we also make sure you're compliant with as a company. Next, with leadership coaching, we are, if you haven't noticed already, a little different. We are not very corporate, but we do really look at, again, evidence-based leadership programs, things that work. We're not reinventing the wheel here. So we'll take things from different programs that seem to fit your company and implement them. And this will play into not only growing your staff into leaders, but helping with communication, with culture, with time management of themselves and others as they grow as leaders, change management of themselves and others, and creative decision making and motivations. Next, looking at compensation and benefits. We do have a license to write health, life, and retirement plans. And, this category, overall compensation and benefits, I'm sure you're probably all experts on this, but one thing we're specifically excited about is that we can write 401k retirement plans, which we really have seen is so much better than opting into a state program. So if you guys don't know already, this summer in California, if you have even 5 employees, you need retirement plans for them. It's a state mandate. And they're being a little bit lenient with the time frame, but still you can and will get fined for being non-compliant. So it sounds like a nice idea that they're forcing everyone to get retirement plans for their employees. But what's weird is that if you opt in to the Cal Savers program, which is the state-run program, it's not as great as what other places can offer. So for example, just what we can offer in-house, the 401k retirement plans, you're going to have more money for your employees. So they'll be optimizing their retirement investments. They'll have more tax credits and more tax deductions. And it sounds expensive, but it's not necessarily, is you as the employer can contribute to their plans. Whereas with Cal Savers, that's not even an option. With compensation, the big trends we're seeing is that money, the salary isn't really king anymore. Money still talks, but things like benefits, certainly work life balance is a lot more popular. And then, like I said earlier, that statistic about purpose and meaning in work is even becoming more important than all of those other things. So next, I wanted to talk about making HR tasks easier. And this really, the steps that we take is that we identify what's working well, what's worrying us, and then create an action plan that's really tailored to your business. So we look at all kinds of things that your employees are doing right from the beginning. It's a very, positive take on it. But we obviously too do look at what's worrying us and what needs to change. And this process is really fun for us because we get to kind of like diagnose and treat your organization, whether you're small or big, remote, in person, and just kind of jumble things around and see how it can change to optimize everything for you. So here you can read these points, but when it comes to employees, I mean, there are so many competencies and strengths and wonderful things about them that we really want to identify and really grow. So I won't read them to you, but you'll see them there. And then next, how do we do this? So this is really just a summary, ensuring and managing employee strengths and competencies, like on the last slide. This process is using assessments, using evidence-based quizzes and interviews, learning and development, making sure that folks are really trained up on the things that they need to do the job right, rotating jobs, moving people around in a place that might be better for them, training them up, enlarging their job enrichment, maybe sometimes giving them a little bit of space to create their job. They might be the expert in their role. And so really helping them enrich what they're already doing and really making that part of your process formally. Peer coaching, so staff to staff, and then peer mentoring, same thing there. That can be very valuable for folks to feel like a part of something and really share information, share and grow within the organization. And then finally, outsourcing, which is really the crux of this whole presentation, is outsourcing. So moving on to the next one. We, as part of the outsourcing that we provide, and Alejandra will touch on this pretty soon here, is that we want to make HR tasks easier for your company in any way possible. One of the easiest ways nowadays, it's 2022, is using tech. So for payroll and compensation, there's a ton out there. I might have mentioned earlier that we've looked at a lot of them. We've seen pros and cons and what works for big versus small organizations. So we can make some recommendations for you. Technologies for talent acquisition and management, human resources information system that's going to be really good for your company. There's a bunch out there. So really helping you identify which one's best for you. Time tracking services in technologies like ClickUp and Gusto. This isn't just important for optimizing the workflow, but it's really important to be compliant as well. So where I'm going with that is that in California, there are regulations that say you need to have time tracking policies and make it really clear about how employees enter time, what they're entering them for, et cetera. So again, it really does come down to compliance for some of this stuff, which is cool because it's, win-win, or you're killing two birds with one stone. I guess you're, making your life easier, but also being compliant. Performance management, lots of technologies out there. Again, we've kind of done the dirty work looking at all the different ones out there and identifying which is better for different companies. And then finally, benefits administration. Again, we're all about helping you be compliant, but two, helping your employees feel like they're taken care of. And it just, honestly, what I've seen just even in recent interviews is that people really do want jobs for compensation and benefits. Even though there are a lot of other reasons people take jobs, we can't forget that people do work for money, people do work for health insurance and things like that. So when it comes to benefits administration, we want to just make sure that you as a company are compliant, and two, that your employees are happy. So why would we outsource? I'm going to pass the torch to Alejandra so she can talk a little bit about the pros of outsourcing HR services.
Thank you, Carlyn. That was amazing. I learned so much, by the way. Thank you. So one of the things that why outsource is a question that I hear actually all the time. Why not hire internally, or you said an outsourcing agency, consulting agency for any of the services in reality? And if you look at it from like a CEO, point of view and perspective, and as we are getting into a recession next year, just without a recession, like as a small business owner, you have to be very smart in allocating your funds, right? Cash management is one of the biggest things that we go by as a small business owner, especially somebody that is starting a company. And one of the things the CEOs look for is, minimize the burn rate and obviously increase your profits. So in order to ensure that, one of the strategies to take is to actually hire a fractional person. And what that means is that this person is actually focusing a fraction of the time for a fraction of the money in important tasks that you already need, that your company needs. When you hire somebody that's full-time employee within your organization, 40% of the time, study says 40% of the time actually gets wasted on activities that do not generate any revenue. So as a small business owner or as somebody that's just starting a company, hiring a fraction of the cost makes more sense. Now, when you are actually a big corporation or a big established company, you have a lot of stability, then perhaps creating an internal team would make more sense. But if you're in that initial stage, or you're in that stage that, there's a recession coming, we need to look ahead and be proactive, then hiring fractional is the way to go. And then with that, I am going to go ahead and open up the room for any questions that you may have. We would be happy to answer them. You can please just write them on the chat box if you have any questions. Okay, well, we appreciate everybody that joined us on this amazing Tuesday evening. And go to our website, and also we have our contact information here on this slide. You can reach me at alejandrastartuptandem.com. Carlyn can be reached at carlyn@startuptandem.com. Please write us a note, send us your questions, and we will be really happy to answer them.
I'd like to add to you really quick that we also do free consultations or assessments for your company, and we would love to have a conversation with you.
Yay. Thank you, Carlyn.
Thanks
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.